Controversy erupted this weekend over comments from Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, comments that had Donald Trump's supporters up in arms, had the DeSantis camp screaming that he's been taken out of context and scrambling to blame the media for not representing the governor's comments accurately. So, there is no confusion, I want to make sure there's none, about what the governor said. We want to play for you the full 1 minute and 25-second comment in its entirety. This is Governor DeSantis speaking with a Florida reporter on Friday.
We have a strand in our party that views supporting Trump as whether you are a rhino or not. And so you could be the most conservative person since sliced bread. Unless you're kissing his rear end, they will somehow call you a rhino. So it's been totally detached from principle and what you actually believe and results, and it's more about, just what faction you happen to do. So there'll be people who are huge Trump supporters, like in Congress, who have like incredibly liberal left-wing records that's really just atrocious, and yet they're viewed as by some of these folks as like really, really good. Then you have other people, like a Congressman Chip Roy, who's endorsed me, Congressman Thomas Massey. These guys have records of principle fighting the swamp that are second to none, and yet they will be attacked by some of these people and called rhinos. So it's just been totally detached from any type of substance. And ultimately, a movement can't be about the personality of one individual. The movement has got to be about what are you trying to achieve on behalf of the American people. And that's got to be based in principle, because if you're not rooted in principle, if all we are is listless vessels that's just supposed to follow, whatever happens to come down the pike on Truth Social every morning, that's not going to be a durable movement.
Now, this didn't seem like a particularly controversial comment, apart from the fact that it was DeSantis' hardest direct hit on Trump to date. And they're running against one another, and that happens, right? But here were three main points that DeSantis made there. One, that supporting, or in his words, kissing the rear end of Donald Trump appears to be a litmus test for a strand of the party on whether one is considered a real Republican or a rhino Republican in name only, and that doesn't make sense. Okay, he's right. The second is about how a movement cannot be about the personality of one individual, but should be about whether they're trying to achieve what they're trying to achieve for the country, which is also right. And then the final part, the one that drew the controversy, that such a movement needs to be rooted in principle. And those not focused on principles, who just parrot whatever Donald Trump says on Truth Social, are effectively listless vessels, and that's not a durable movement. He's also right about that. Now, as you might expect, the Trump campaign hit back with a spokesperson saying, quote, "To Hillary Clinton, Trump supporters are deplorables. To Ron DeSantis, they're listless vessels. The truth is Trump supporters are patriots. Ron DeSantis is showing his true colors." So the governor finally took a shot at Trump, and those Trump supporters who aren't focusing on issues, right? That's specifically what he was focusing on. And instead, the ones he's saying who are just supporting Trump's rhetoric, no matter what he says. Not all Trump supporters, but some. But it seems now the criticism has the DeSantis team running scared and, of course, blaming the media. On CNN on Sunday, Ken Cuccinelli, who founded a major super PAC supporting Ron DeSantis, accused CNN of misrepresenting what the governor was saying. Let's listen.
There was a pretty interesting moment in a recent interview where Governor DeSantis talked about Trump supporters. He used the words listless vessels.
But he wasn't talking about Trump supporters.
Hold on. I'm going to play it for everybody, and then you can go ahead. Let's listen.
A movement can't be about the personality of one individual. If all we are is listless vessels that's just supposed to follow, whatever happens to come down the pike on Truth Social every morning, that's not going to be a durable movement.
Everybody just saw there that there was a cut. You cut from the beginning of that quote to the listless vessels. You just did what the problem is. So everybody who just watched that, understand, go read the transcript.
Okay, fine. So you summarize for us what was it that he was trying to say?
Well, first of all, his first point is an excellent point. This should be about America, not about individuals.
Okay.
And
how do we get from there to listless vessels?
Yes, well, the rest of an entire paragraph, by the way. I mean, there's a pretty big gap in your cut. So he's talking about some of the folks in D.C. who've endorsed Trump. He's talking about the more general environment and referring to all of us collectively. We can't just sit back and take all of this, be listless vessels. We have to move ahead with a different vision. That was not Trump assigned. And so folks, go read the transcript. You don't have to listen to me. You go read it yourself.
We just played the whole thing. Look, I don't think CNN took Governor DeSantis out of context. They just shortened it. Of course he was talking about Trump and about people who followed Trump on Truth Social and who echo Trump's attacks on anyone who doesn't support him as being a rhino, no matter how conservative they may be. Just seems that the DeSantis team maybe can't handle the Trump team heat. But let's ask the man himself, Ken Cuccinelli, founder of the DeSantis for President Super PAC Never Back Down. He also served as the acting deputy secretary for the Department of Homeland Security in the Trump administration. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. All right, what am I getting wrong here?
Well, first of all, I appreciate you all playing the entire clip, unlike what CNN did. And it's not like CNN comes to the conservative audience, whomever may be watching, with much in the way of credibility. So when they edit and chop that, to their news advantage, that's an issue. And I appreciate you playing the whole clip. I also agree with your 3 points of what was said. I would note that DeSantis said, we just can't be listless vessels. He's talking about the conservative movement vis-a-vis just pronouncements from Truth Social, which is about Trump. You're correct about that. But they're making an immense mountain out of a molehill, while this movement conservative, the most conservative candidate running for president, makes a point about principle, about races should be about the future and America and Americans and not about the candidates, and about the conservative movement itself. And I appreciate the fact, as a movement conservative, that he cares about those principles. It's a big part of why I helped start Never Back Down, to support the idea of him running for president, and now the effort for him to run for president. I think he's doing a great job.
But it does seem to me like you guys, and again, there's a statement here from the DeSantis spokesperson as well, are trying to distance yourself from the shot he's clearly taking at Donald Trump. I mean, the dishonest media, he says, refuses to report the facts. Donald Trump and some congressional endorsers are listless vehicles. Why? Because Trump and D.C. insiders feel he's entitled to your vote, et cetera. And then, goes on to clarify, I guess, what Ron DeSantis meant to say. But what Ron DeSantis did say, and again, I think it makes sense. He said the movement has got to be about what you're trying to achieve on behalf of the American people. That's got to be based in principle, because if you're not rooted in principle, if all we are is listless vessels that you're supposed to follow, whatever happens to come down the pike on Truth Social every morning, that's not going to be a durable movement. That's saying if you're just going to listen to everything Trump says on Truth Social every morning and parrot it, that's not a durable movement. Is that an unfair characterization of it?
Yeah. I don't think we're really disagreeing here.
Okay, yeah.
I don't think what you have said is at odds with what I have said. I mean, they didn't duck the fact that Trump was roped into this comment, but let's not forget, this man is a movement conservative who cares about the principles. And when he says we can't be listless vessels, that's what he's talking about. The comparison is to just doing whatever Trump says. When Trump gives Fauci an award, we shouldn't clap. We should say, no, you should fire Fauci. When Trump hires Christopher Wray and then complains about Christopher Wray, we say, no, you should fire Christopher Wray. And that's what Ron DeSantis is doing. So I do not think, by the way, your early characterization, this is anywhere near the toughest punch that Ron DeSantis has thrown at Donald Trump.
What was?
The punches Ron DeSantis.
What's a harder
Ron
punch?
DeSantis is hit. How about if you let me finish?
I'm just asking.
The toughest punches Ron DeSantis are throwing are on the issues where Donald Trump was wrong, big time wrong, and things like saying, I'm going to drain the swamp, and then bringing in John Boehner personnel and Christopher Wray and Mark Milley and Tony Fauci. He built the swamp. He grew the swamp. He didn't drain the swamp. Ron DeSantis is the only leader running for president today who has fired Soros prosecutors, a big deal to Republican voters, the kind of thing you need to do to drain the swamp. He hasn't hired them like Donald Trump did with Christopher Wray.
That doesn't seem to me to be much of a punch,
It's a big
though.
difference.
I mean, that seems to me to be just red meat, sort of talking point stuff, rather than an actual punch
Well, look,
at Donald
Donald Trump likes to call names.
Yeah.
Donald Trump likes to call names, and Ron DeSantis is trying to avoid that and to stay on issues of substance. And when I talk to individual voters, they tell me they don't like the name calling. They don't like that. They want to know who's talking to them about their future and what's going to make their life better. The candidate focusing on them and not on himself, who's Donald Trump. And Ron DeSantis is focused on Americans and the future and improving this economy and undoing the damage of Joe Biden. And all Donald Trump talks about is Donald Trump.
Hey, thank you for watching. Please go to newsnationnow.com, newsnationnow.com, and you can find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button down below. Then you will get more of NewsNation's fact-driven coverage.